Thanks for tuning in to more New York Jets draft talk on Inside Our Lads NFL Depth Charts, New York Jets edition, Jets FM on the OFN with Jan Levine from RotoWire. Jan, we are just a couple of days away, finally, from kicking off the NFL draft and the New York Jets with their 2 selections in the first round. So no matter what the Jets do, we're going to have a busy night on Thursday night. Not just 1 pick, but maybe 2, and who knows if there'll be more.
Maybe 3.
Who knows?
Yeah, we're press time. We're about 49 hours this or so away. No real news yet, but clearly, obviously, there's been always chatter. Once we seem to be locked on the number 2, unless there's a shocker, and Joe Douglas goes completely off the board from what we're expecting. We know the number 2 pick. The question becomes is when we get to 23, and then clearly when we get to 34. Right, there's obviously been a lot of talk, and we and I have talked about, does he trade up if there's somebody he really likes using the additional capital? Does he try to slide down slightly to grab maybe another 2nd-round pick or 3rd-round pick in the mix? It wouldn't shock me if we somehow end up with 3 first-round picks, since technically right now we're just slightly on the outskirts of the first round with our second-round pick. If he moves up, if one of the cornerbacks that he really likes falls there, or if he goes corner at 23, and Travis Etienne or somebody like that slides a little bit, does he move up from 34 to grab Etienne, figuring he may not make it all the way back to them at 34?
Yeah, well, look, Etienne is not making it to 34, so I think that's the scenario, is if they don't grab the running back with their 2nd pick, what I don't want to see as a Jet fan is Buffalo taking Etienne. I don't know, we spend a 4th or 5th round pick on another running back. We decide that we're going to be a running back by committee offense, which might be the case with what we've saw at San Francisco. That's how they won. They ran the football.
And Mostert got the ball.
And he was not a high draft pick.
No, he's not. Juszczyk got the ball as a fullback, got the ball, but he's a rarity because he has the ability to catch the ball and make guys miss a little bit. So he's a rarity.
He's not a high pick.
But you had 3-4 guys there who were in the mix that kind of shifted game to game and based on injuries as to who was the lead back.
If that's the case, and that's just what's going to bother me, is if we go this running back by committee, Etienne goes to the Bills and becomes a superstar. So hopefully that won't be the case, but it could be. Could be the way the Jets are going to go. But I think that's the way the Jets move back in to get ahead of Buffalo, to make sure they get the running back and the Bills don't. That's how I would say. Otherwise, I don't see the Jets moving back into the 2nd round, in the 1st round. But
so I would think Douglas probably going to start to hit. I mean, he'll be on the phones a lot, as guys move, but probably in the 18-ish range, you'll start making phone calls, right, to see, hey, what's my cost to move up? What's my cost to move down? Excuse me. What are the costs for both? If I pick the cornerback here, what if I want to move back up from 34 to 24, 25, or 27 and get ahead of Buffalo? What's that capital? Is it a 2nd rounder? Is it a 3rd rounder? How much do I got to move up 7 or 8 picks to move up? And he'll start to have all those scenarios plotted out, depending on how the draft unfolds, right? And none of us, look, there could be guys who end up, as they always do, going a lot earlier than we expect and a lot later than we expect, right? So he may sit in the catbird seat, have a couple of cornerbacks available at 23, grab one, and then try to move up again. Or maybe he grabs the running back, figuring, hey, there's 3-4 guys I like at cornerback, right? I can move up anywhere within a 4 or 5 pick radius, pick any one of those guys that I like, and maybe go that route. And so it kind of all depends on how the draft unfolds as we get to that spot.
The main positions that the Jets will be targeting after their 1st pick will definitely be running back, cornerback, and offensive line. Those will be the 3 main positions that we're going to be looking at. It doesn't mean that they won't go in other ways if a really good player in another position of need, like linebacker or another edge rusher or a wide receiver, somebody like that falls to them. Okay. But more than likely, with the picks that they have early, it's offensive line, running back, and cornerback. Because right now you have Austin, Hall as your starters. And as much as we like their upside, we've talked about their inexperience. And the same thing with Guidry and Jackson. But Poole is still a free agent, which
which
I don't know what this is
is
about.
amazing.
I just don't.
Uh,
It's
and maybe we get him cheap, quote unquote, again, as he did last year, right? If nobody's out there, I mean, the two scenarios is he wants to lock in a deal and take something a little cheaper, or he tries to stay in shape until camps open,
nah, it won't
and
be.
then
I can't
hopes
see
the
it being
team
that
suffers
late.
an injury. Well, again, those are the two scenarios, but I would
Jets ain't
think
gonna wait that
if he
long.
gets
That's
a
for sure.
look, if I'm the Jets, I'm a little surprised because he played well as a slot corner last year, and there's a even if you grab a cornerback, there's a crying need for a good slot cornerback in
In
this
the
system, right?
NFL,
And
I can't believe the
right,
amount of teams that could use a good nickelback have not signed this guy. I don't understand it. There's something about him that we don't get, that other teams just don't value him as high as we do. But look, we'll trust that they know what they're doing. And taking a look at the cornerbacks, now keep in mind the cornerback situation goes about four. Yeah, you're going to have your top five. You're going to have Surtain, Horn, Samwell Jr., Newsom, and Farley. That's it. Once you get
and I
past
think
those
that
guys, you are making a big gamble and a big drop in production.
right. So I think the first three are gone before it gets to the Jets pick at 23.
I would
I think
agree with
Newsom
that.
is
Yes.
I think Newsom is the potential target. Farley has slid in the draft rankings in a lot of people's boards and is somebody who I've seen targeted for the Jets at number
And
34.
Samwell as
You
well. You don't
wonder,
know if he'll be around.
yeah, but I think he goes a little earlier. I think Sam. Look, great pedigree, right? In terms of Samuel, I mean, great blood genes, bloodlines,
Sure.
also, right? I mean, but Farley's a guy who slid a little bit this year. Who you're taking a risk if you hope he makes the 34. Let's say they go. Let's say they don't go Newsom at 23. They go Etienne at 23. You start thinking 27, 28 range. If he's there, I'm kind of being a little aggressive
It
and
could
trying to
be.
move up even
Yeah,
4 picks to try to
could
get him.
be. And that's why if they're saying we have to get definitely a starting caliber corner, and look, I don't know if they're thinking about a starting caliber running back, but if they are, then they very well might trade into the first round. It's very possible. So
We said we need playmakers, right? Etienne is one of those
he
guys who's
is.
clearly a playmaker.
He is, and that's
Clearly
that's
a
what I'm saying.
playmaker. So
See, I know there are a lot of Jet fans, even just talking to them on some of the message boards. I think they try to get ahead of themselves. We're not building a Super Bowl team in a couple of days. We got a couple of years of building a Super Bowl team, so you can't do it all in one off season. And I just feel when you get the opportunity to get a running back with the talent of Etienne, if you can get him and you don't have to do anything crazy, I just think you have to go and get him, because then you put yourself in a position where you say, we've got Davis and Mims, we've got our receivers. We have hopefully Herndon becomes our tight end. We've got now our running back and we have our quarterback. So we now have our skill position youth all set up for the next 5 or 6 years. We can take care of the rest of our team with other picks and next offseason and next draft. It's just a hard thing. Sort of like when you look at what the way the Cowboys built their championship. Aikman, Emmett Smith, Michael Irvin. You have to kind of do that. You have to kind of make sure that you get these superstar guys whenever you have a chance to get them. That's the main reason why I hope they do it. But like I said, look, they might have a different philosophy than we do, and they might just go with running back by committee.
and Emmett lasted to number 22 that year, so it shows how teams make mistakes in the draft, right? Him
Emmett
lasted
Smith, yeah,
22.
yeah,
Yeah, you look at now and you go, why? How? And again, after his first year, there was the question, right? But they also had the offensive line. They also built that defensive line. I
absolutely,
mean, but look, the Herschel Walker trade clearly
yeah,
helped them, right? Which is
yeah.
why we talk about Douglas having the willingness and desire to trade up or down, especially down, to acquire more picks, right? That could be in the mix as well. But as you said, I think if there's a guy on the board that they really like, they're going to stay in the position where they are and not take the risk of missing out on that guy.
Now, there are some people who really like Javonte Williams from North Carolina. I wouldn't have a problem with if the Jets want to take him at 34 or after 34, but you're not moving up to get him. And there is a drop once you get past him. You know, you're going to have your
Mm-hmm.
top two, then you have Williams, and then there's a drop. So if the Jets don't go after any of those three, again, you're talking committee, and there's always going to be middle to late round guys that are going to be like, that are out there. And we just talked about one of them in Mostert with San Francisco. You look at guys like Jamar Jefferson from Oregon State, highly productive in a big conference, is only supposed to be a late sixth round kind of guy. I mean, Jarrett Patterson from Buffalo had like these 300-yard games for Buffalo,
Yep.
and he's a late round guy. Demetric Felton, I'm a big fan of at UCLA because you can put him at running back, wide receiver. You can play a multitude of positions. He's a guy that it could last to the sixth round or the seventh round. So there are going to be these types of guys that the Jets could end up going with instead of using up a premium pick on a running back.
Yeah, I mean they're always guys you can grab late, right? I mean, and they may grab more than one guy, but they have a couple of guys who from last year we saw can be productive in the right system. The cautionary tale is you just can't overrate what you saw, right? There was a guys who we saw who I know you wanted a couple, especially Johnson, especially and a couple others to get more carries. They finally did. You were ecstatic to see kind of the production that they have. I don't know whether or not I'm reliant on that, but they need to be very careful not to overrate. Obviously, Salah coming in has a different view. He'll evaluate things differently because he's evaluating the system he's implementing. He's evaluating it, not necessarily being knee deep in it, but having that step back and reviewing things as kind of as a oppositional type coach, right? Looking at film and seeing what these guys are, as opposed to maybe being swayed by the fact that these guys are quote unquote your guys, right? Nobody now is technically a Salah guy, as far as we know. If he has guys he may like, which may impact his decision making in terms of who they may want to keep.
Well, look, I mean, only Tevin Coleman. I think isn't he the only San Francisco 49er we have?
Yep.
So,
Right now until we see what happens with Richard
yeah,
Sherman, that's been talked about for a while. But yeah,
that's
Coleman
it.
and Coleman clear look. Coleman may not have been getting a lot of jobs, but he clearly came here. And honestly, as you and I talked then, he didn't get big money at all to come to New
No,
York. Right? He's a nice
he's a
backup. He's a
good
nice change
veteran
of pace
backup.
guy.
That's all.
I don't think is right. Right. So you still need to bring in hopefully your bell cow kind of a back to be your number one. You can still alternate
Sure.
with other guys, but a guy like Etienne is a 3 down type of
He
back.
is. He's a guy, exactly. And that's why you have to wonder if they're going to go in that direction. But they do have, again, Ty Johnson, it was, like you said, limited opportunities, but he showed us something. He's got good speed. We don't know what we have in P. Ryan. We just don't. So
Yep.
maybe they still feel real good about P. Ryan as well. Wide receiver, a little bit later on, you could take a look at a couple of guys. I mean, there are some really productive receivers once you get even to the fourth, fifth round. That if they want to use a pick on a receiver, you got a couple of guys from Clemson, including Amari Rogers. You have Tylan Wallace from Oklahoma State. So there's a ton of productive college wideouts that you can get. Now it's not a major need for the team because Vincent Smith will hopefully be healthy and make the team especially as a primary kick returner. Berrios is right now the backup slot player and also top punt returner. Then you have Cole and Davis that were brought in. So I actually don't see the Jets using a pick on a receiver, especially when you have a guy like Lawrence Cager, who could also be somebody to keep an eye on in the mix that just wasn't able to stay healthy last year.
First of all, I think it's not a bad idea to bring in a receiver anyway, given the number of picks they have. I think that depends on where you focus your other picks. And we talked about running back, quarterback, cornerback, offensive line are the key needs. But if a guy slides a lot further than you expect him and you have him high on your board and you view him as being potentially ridiculously productive, especially as you get to the fourth round or so, I do see them making a move that way. Look, last year we were screaming and ranting going, take another quarter, take another wide receiver, take another wide receiver. And they didn't. And they ended up getting Mims, who once he came back from his injury, showed that he had the talent to be selected where he was. Granted, they passed on Jefferson because they traded down. There's other guys that they missed out on. But there were third and fourth round guys who they could have and should have taken last year that they didn't. I don't know if they'll make that same mistake this year. If a guy who they view highly slides by saying, well, we have enough guys in our system, I think they're going to go after the guy to bring in talent, irrespective of what else they have there.
And we talked about this already. Again, depending on whether or not they're going to use a fullback the same way that they used the fullback at San Francisco, Ben Mason is by far the number one and only fullback in the draft that will get drafted. So if the Jets are looking for a premium fullback, Ben Mason is going to be the guy. An offensive line, there are a lot of fans that really want to see the Jets use their second first round draft pick on a lineman. And I understand where they're coming from. I get it. I really do. But I just don't believe that this offensive line is as bad as it was in 2019. Uh, Douglas made some big improvements, not only through Becton, but a couple of the free agents. I know they didn't stay healthy most of the season, but in general, if you have a good team surrounding these guys, I think they can be effective at least for another season. That doesn't mean that you don't spend a couple of more mid-round draft picks on some linemen, but and I'm not saying that they won't use their first-round draft pick on a lineman. It's just that if they do, I think they're going to be really confident that it's a guy that they can plug in right away and a guy that can be a surefire starter day one. Otherwise, you can use a couple of picks in the third and fourth round and pick up some more interior guys. And I still think George Fant at right tackle for another year is not a bad thing. He's not a bad football player. He's not a superstar. He may not be as good as who you would pick with that second first round pick maybe in the future, but you can still win with George Fant at right tackle for another few years.
So last year they grabbed a couple of guys. Clark obviously pretty much missed pretty much the entire
Yep.
season based on injury, right? There's still some hope for him. You can still grab a third round guy who can become a starter,
Yes.
which we've seen in the past. So if you grab a guy in the first couple of rounds, the expectation is you're hopefully plugging and playing him in your lineup, right? Obviously, the number one pick they're not using on an offensive lineman. I still think they're going to go cornerback or running back too. But I would be more inclined to believe they'll use their second round pick on a lineman as opposed to their first round pick on a lineman.
Especially if they don't want to go running back.
Right, and I do think it's in perfect scenarios they'll use at least their first pick in the third round on an offensive lineman, the best one that may still be on the board, especially if it's an interior lineman.
Yeah, there's just so many quality interior linemen once you get past the Jets' top 3 picks. You just don't have to use up one of those top 3 picks on a lineman and say that the Jets are just forgetting about the offensive line. It's not the case. They've got a ton of picks. If the scouting guys, if Joe Douglas knows what he's doing, and we have faith that he does, that he'll be able to find a couple of long-term starters outside the top couple of picks. Not every pick on your offensive line needs to be Mekhi Becton, with one of the top picks in the draft.
Well, it'd be nice. Well, it'd be nice if it was that talented.
Sure, it would be. And look, just like any position, you can pick up long-term superstar players outside the first round on the offensive line too. It doesn't always have to be that's I think people sometimes get carried away thinking that you can't find these guys outside the first round and expect they're going to have long careers.
Oh, agreed. I mean, I'll say the propensity of the players you see on the offensive line are those not picked in the first round, right? You can always find guys who are becoming starters. I mean, I think you saw it in Buffalo last year. You saw it, I think, in Kansas City to a certain extent last year. You saw it in a couple of other places, right? So I don't know. Was Thuney a first round pick by the Patriots years ago?
No. I don't
right.
think
So that was a perfect example of a guy who's made himself into a starter and a pretty darn good one, who then goes out, who's now going in Kansas City to be one of the anchors of their line, right? And I think it's pretty evident that seems to be the majority of those we see on the offensive line are non-first round picks, just because of the nature of the number of first round picks in general, but just because how lines are put together, teams are reluctant at times to spend high draft pick on these guys. They'd rather spend either lower picks or mid round picks and try to pick up guys that have the upside as opposed to the guys that have the bigger names, given how the higher failure rate for those type of guys.
Yeah, that was a good example because Thuney was a third round draft pick, and look what he's become. So that's why it's exactly where I thought the Jets should be using their interior lineman picks in the third and the fourth round. Go after those guys. And again, like I said, I don't have a problem with George Fant at right tackle. I just don't. Especially if you have an elite left tackle and you have really good players inside as well, and you use a couple of picks inside at guard and center, which hopefully they will. Could definitely win with George Fant. I mean, the Seattle Seahawks had some pretty successful seasons with George Fant playing on the offensive line with Seattle. So not that he was an elite player, but it just goes to show you that he's okay.
No, I mean, I think part of it, to a certain extent, I'll call it recency bias, right? Those Jet fans who grew up with the team, right, are very much recollecting what Mangold and what Ferguson did, right? Both of those guys
Top
were first
picks.
round
Yep.
picks. That drives the recency bias in terms of the type of guys that they became. Of course, they don't remember the Mike Haight pick
Oh my
years ago,
goodness.
who turned out to be a bust, right? So there's a balance that you have to consider when you
Yes.
start
Don't bring that
considering
up,
where you start
please.
grabbing these
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, because look, I mean, there are even a couple of linemen that are going to be in the second round that if the Jets wanted to take a second or third round guy, you're looking at the kid from North Dakota State who protected Trey Lance, Dylan Raydance. He's a second, third rounder. A Northern Iowa 6'8", 314 kid by the name of Spencer Brown, also a second or third round guy. There's a ton of really good players that you can get at tackle, guard, and center once you get past those first three picks. Meanwhile, on defense, there's still talk about the Jets using not just like the way I said it. All right, if somebody slips, you go after an edge rusher, but it just seems to be people thinking that the Jets like need to spend one of their early picks on a defensive lineman. I mean, are they counting the fact? Are they looking at the Arlad's depth chart, thinking that just because we still have it as the 3-4 defense, because Dan doesn't change the depth chart just because Sal is there and he's going to change it to a 4-3. He has to wait until Salah changes it to a 4-3 defense. We all know he's changing it to a 4-3 defense. Can't you count? We have like 8 or 9 defensive linemen who are all going to play. So it has to be a guy that slips. It has to be a guy that's just too talented to pass up. That they just go, oh, I mean, this guy's, we got to take him.
Yeah, I mean, I think we discussed this last time, right? I think it's the only way they really go after guys if a guy who slips. I don't think they're going to expend a high pick on a guy like that just because of the nature of who they already have on the line. Um, Linebacker
Unless we
also, I
want to
don't know
be,
that maybe they grip.
the doomsday defense or something like that.
Well, that would not be a bad thing at
It wouldn't
all.
be.
Uh, but grabbing, I would think that if they're focused on defense, it's clearly going to be defensive backfield is going to be the main focus of guys who they pick. And again, they're going to grab at least one, and for all we know, they may grab two in the draft, especially if they get one later who they like a lot. Look, last year they got a Hall very late. A guy we both think that has a material amount of upside. They got Austin Davis in the third round, who didn't have a great year, but I don't think we're relatively have a decent amount of upside in Davis that we didn't see last year. That maybe Salah's system will help, and now that he's 100% healthy, that may assist him in terms of kind of reaching his
Yeah,
potential.
I mean, there's definitely going to be two, and three would not be a shock either. But as we also talked about, if you add these guys, they have to make the team. And then you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about veteran defensive line corners like a Richard Sherman type or someone else because you have to bring in at least one veteran. I mean, I'd be shocked if it's Austin, Hall, Guidry, Jackson, and maybe they re-sign Poole and then two guys at a draft, and that's your corners. I mean, that would be one hell of a young cornerback group. With Poole being clearly the veteran of that unit, so we'll see. Um, uh, Look, you look at San Francisco and what Salah did over the last couple of years, and yes, he had Sherman had a great year the year they went to the Super Bowl, but last year Sherman was hurt, and their secondary was guys that were mid-round guys, patchwork guys. So once again, Salah's probably going, hey, you know what? I like the guys. I like the young guys on this team. I can coach them up. Let's bring in a couple more young guys that I can coach up, and maybe we'll sign just one veteran and that looks like that might be the case unless he signs Sherman and Poole.
And if he signs Sherman and Poole, I still think they're going for one more young guy.
They're gonna go two or three young guys.
Right? Because Poole's still your slot, your nickel anyway,
Yep.
right? So one of the young guys is definitely going to start, right? And you need to have the depth, which is what San Francisco showed last year when injuries hit.
Keep an eye on another guy that might slip at tight end, and that's Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan, who had first round talent last year, did not have a big year this year, but he still has a lot of talent. He's going to go supposedly in the third or fourth round. I could see the Jets if he slides and he's the best available player on the board, just like we talked about with wide receiver. It's not a primary need, but we're not 100% sure about Christopher Herndon. I could see them. Jordan's the only guy that I would see them even spending because once you get past Freiermuth and of course Pitts, there's just a drop off. Jordan is the next guy, and he's not even going to be around past the third or fourth round. So I don't see the Jets using any picks on the tight end spot unless Brevin Jordan slips. That's it.
I'd agree with that. I mean, again, look, we thought last year we went into the year where we had good depth in tight end, and it proved out to be a fallacy because nobody really had a good year at all except Herndon. The last couple of games finally showed some signs, but you look, Wesco didn't have a good year. The other backup tight ends, we all came into there going, "Oh, we've got good depth at tight end. We're definitely going to be set there." And it was honestly
Yeah,
a bust by
Griffin did
comparison.
nothing.
Well, he got hurt also,
So yeah,
he's back this year, but he missed a good part of the year hurt. Wesco didn't do much, and Brown didn't do much either. So we got nothing for the most part out of the tight end spot. And Herndon was a major disappointment until maybe week
yep.
14 he finally started showing some signs.
And again,
so,
if we don't draft a tight end, then everything about this tight end unit falls on Christopher Herndon. So that's why they might decide, hey, this guy slips, let's go get him so we don't have. But again, tight end, you can go with this group another year, and then hopefully Herndon becomes the tight end that the team wants. You don't have to worry about it anymore. If he doesn't, then next year, next offseason, you go ahead and make sure that you improve the cornerback room. And before we go, I'd keep an eye also on Cameron Bynum. He played with Ashton Davis at Cal. Bynum's about a 6th-round draft pick. That's where he's supposed to go. 4-year starter, 2-time team captain, leader, perfect type of guy you want in your locker room. So I'd keep an eye on him as a late-round corner. And Jose Borregales is probably going to be the only kicker drafted.
Yep.
And he had a great college career. Lou Groza winner this past year from Miami. I wouldn't be surprised because right now, Chase McLaughlin and Sam Ficken are going to battle it out. McLaughlin really didn't get a fair chance. He's got talent, so I wouldn't rule him out. Braden Mann, you would think he's going to more than likely get another shot. But Borregales, the Jets used a draft pick on a punter last year. We'll see if they use one on a kicker this year.
I think there's a second kicker, if I remember correctly, who could potentially factor into the mix. But it would be interesting if if Douglas goes kicker in back-to-back drafts. I think Jets Twitter might implode upon itself at that point in time because you remember remember what happened last year when he picked Mann. Everybody was apoplectic.
Yeah.
So
they didn't like the fact that they picked a backup quarterback and a punter. They were like, "Oh, what are you using these picks for?"
Yeah, well, Morgan really was kind of a waste, at least as of right now. We'll see what happens.
He was never going to play. He's not a waste.
I know, but again,
he'll be a waste in 2 years if he never plays.
I said we'll see.
So that's the interesting thing about.
And I didn't think I thought Mann got better as the year wore on. By the way, I thought he actually started to get a lot better as the year wore on.
And that's going to be the interesting thing about whether the Jets feel they have to go out and get a veteran, or look, when you use a 4th-round draft pick on a quarterback, I would hope by his 2nd year he's your backup. I'm sorry, but that's the way. You're a young team. You're not trying to win a Super Bowl next year. If your quarterback starter gets hurt, you drafted this guy for a reason. Let him play. Go put him in there. If not, then like you said, then would you spend a 4th-round pick on him for?
Right.
So
I agree.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets didn't go with a veteran and let James Morgan be the number 2. All right, so we are going to come back on Friday morning early. So 8 a.m. we're going to do the show, so it'll be available online on the YouTube channel by around 9. This way it'll have the whole day before round 2 starts. And then we are going to recap the draft on Sunday morning. So that'll give us an opportunity to get a heads up on everybody who probably will wait till Monday. So we'll get it in the books on the channel on Sunday by noon. And this way we'll get our observations. We'll take a look again at the Our Lads draft guide right here. Go to ourlads.com, order the draft guide right now. Don't think that you wasted time and you don't get it until after the draft, because after the draft, I think, is more important than before the draft, because you can go into this book and find out all that you want to know about every player the Jets draft and every rookie that they sign after the draft. I'm not sure how much time we're going to have since we're doing the show on Sunday morning to talk about rookies signings. I doubt it. Most of them don't get signed until late in the day on Monday, but maybe we'll have a sprinkling here or there of guys that the Jets signed that they couldn't draft on Saturday.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
So am I, Jan. Let's get the show on the road on Thursday, and
2 days away.
This is what the building a Super Bowl championship's all about, and this is step 2. Joe Douglas's second draft. We'll start the recap on Friday. Enjoy it on Thursday night, Jan, and we'll talk to you on Friday morning.